Welcome to your Everyday Life podcast with words of encouragement. We hope that you walk away today in your everyday walking around kind of life, feeling energized by the words of encouragement you are about to hear. Each week, the message will inspire you in your plain old ordinary life. Knowing that Jesus is there with you every step of the day and not somewhere far off will give you new perspectives of your daily life. You can find us online at youreverydaylife.org. Go there and subscribe so you can get new weekly devotional blog posts in addition to the many posts on site. So be encouraged in your everyday life. And now, here are your hosts, Scott Ramsey and his wife, Carmen.
Hello, everybody. What's up today? We are encouraged and excited about having Randy and Julie with us today. So welcome to your Everyday Life podcast. And this is the podcast about your everyday life with Jesus. And so today we're talking about the topic with Randy and Julie, battles and being persistent. Not the exact title, but we're going to talk in that mode on what's going on in their lives and their everyday walk and how that relates to our everyday walk. So our guests, Randy and Julie, welcome. Great to have you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. And actually, we're going to let Carmen do a little formal introduction of you two because we want our listeners to get to know you a little bit before we jump into our conversation. Go ahead, Carmen.
Well, Randy and Julie have been together for 40 years, married for 33 of those. That is awesome. 4 beautiful children, I'm sure. And looking at the ages, 29, 27, 20, and 17, you guys are right where we're at with our kids. They do have 2 children, Mark and Luke, who are adopted from China, where the Watsons lived for several years. They've also been in Belgium, so they're world travelers. They've been a little bit of everywhere. Pardon me. Randy's first career was in research and development as a chemist, and then he segued into his second career in pastoral work. And he applies that same methodology that he did in research and development with his chemist work to his ministry as well. Julie has the wonderful privilege of being able to stay at home and take care of her grandbaby now. And she also helps women in ministry to fulfill their calling. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that as well. They're passionate about counseling. They use counseling couples with biblical wisdom towards healthy and thriving marriages. I think in a day and age like this, we all need a little bit of that. And they are avid outdoor people. So anytime they can be together and outdoors, they are in their happy place. And we are so happy to have both of you here today.
Thank you. That made us sound really
Wow.
It
made
us
sound
really old.
That was quite the intro. My goodness.
Right.
So if I could get spiritual for a second, I mean, you guys have to be on your toes in that everyday walk, don't you? To be prepared and ready and for all those different things going on in season and out of season, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a grand adventure. You know, you talk about your everyday life. It's not a normal everyday life.
No.
So
okay, yeah.
We don't
What's
do
normal though?
in our house. Exactly. We don't do normal well, I guess I should say.
I tell you, something that wouldn't be normal to me, and it's not, and it won't ever be, is that rock climbing stuff you guys do.
Yeah, I didn't. Right? Yeah, and if you had asked me even 3 years ago, if I thought I would be climbing mountains in my future, I would have laughed in your face and said, absolutely not. There's no way I will do that. So that's been a really fun journey to be on, to kind of to work through that, and to be able to do that with Randy is just a bonus. So.
Do you guys have your eyes on a prize, so to speak, as far as, one you want to conquer or have already conquered?
I don't think so.
There's a long list, and we're blessed where we live. We're just a few hours drive from some world class climbing that people come from all over the world to do, and so we've been we do that whenever we can. And then I've been getting more and more into the alpine type climbing. So a big trip coming up in July to British Columbia for
Oh, nice.
10 days of climbing in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, I think the goal is stay young, stay fit, have fun,
stay healthy. Yeah.
Exactly.
And just to have something to do together. I mean, just something that we enjoy doing together, that really builds that relationship and strengthens that relationship with us, that
Nice.
we learn how to, I mean, we even do a class on it with married couples or dating couples or anything. And it's just the whole time we're doing this, we're like, this so relates to our relationships, the trust, the communication, the interdependence and all that stuff is just all right there in climbing. And so we've kind of turned that into a class that we do.
Yeah. And you can't beat the views. So
absolutely. Yeah.
And I would have to think there's a lot of prayer that goes along with that throughout the process.
Well, amen. So sometimes when Julie's struggling on the side of a cliff, I swear she's speaking in tongues. But
we call it my climbing words. Yeah. We're not allowed to use those anywhere else.
That's another language, certainly.
Another language. That's great.
Yep. Well, and I was going to ask that there must be a lot of parallels that you can draw from that in your everyday life, in your spiritual walk, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's one of those things where we would go climb whatever, and then we come home and you start thinking about it, or you read something in the Bible and with some principle or whatever, and you think, yeah, that's exactly what was going on. And so that was the impetus. Right. We, as Julie mentioned, we created this course. Course makes it sound more formal than it is, but basically we get the climbing club after they close, and we bring in 5 couples at a time. That's all we can manage. And we do 2.5 hours. It's for people that have never climbed before. So it's a great date night, fun date night. But then we use that whole process of the challenge of climbing and of belaying each other and using that to talk about how do you communicate? How do you learn best way to communicate? How do you foster trust? How do you learn to protect each other? All this kind of thing. So, oh gosh, we could talk several podcasts about our passion for applying, well, one, just for climbing, period, but then applying a lot of that stuff to relationships. It really is a neat metaphor.
And it's already sold. I think Scott and I need to sign up.
Well, yeah, come on up.
Come on up. We're doing one in December. So, and I was just, when we were climbing last weekend, I even looked at Rainey. I said, we need to do this with the teens and correlate it to their relationship with God, because it's very similar. You can do it very easily and kind of move it into that as well. So
again, there's a lot of trust there, which every relationship develops out of trust.
Yes.
That's amazing. I love the correlation you've drawn between something that you're so passionate about and being able to relate that to people that, you speak into.
Yeah. And I mentioned even 3 years ago, I would have laughed in your faces because I'm actually terrified of heights. And so it seems like an odd choice of an activity for me to be doing. And the first time I climbed, I literally got halfway up what they call the birthday wall, which is a very, very simple wall, and froze. And I started crying, and I'm like, get me off this wall right now. And I was not even 6 feet off the ground, so going from that and working through all of that to where we are now has been a real journey. So
yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, matter of fact, I want to come back to that a little bit in just a moment, because part of what you two really are well at being able to communicate because of that and many other things, I'm sure, is that persistence in your life and those battles that you face, and that persistence has gotten you through that. But I want to go back first. Hold that thought. I want to go back first because you two are high school sweethearts, right?
Well, he's my high school sweetheart. I'm his college sweetheart because he's 5 years older than I am.
All right. Well, so you're one of those couples, Carmen and I get comments every now and then from people that, our relationship it makes other people gag, like, look at, their sappy love and all that kind of stuff. But I think you two are one of those couples. So,
Did he just say we make people gag? Is that what he just said?
We've actually had similar comments. So,
okay, yeah. But I think that says a lot about your relationship. And that doesn't mean there aren't trials and difficult moments.
Yeah.
But so what I guess my question is, how did, where were you guys in your walk way back then? And where has that taken you today in your walk with Christ?
Well, that's a lot of years you've just asked us to summarize there. But I'll just say, when she was 13 and I was 18, we were canoeing on her lake. You've been there, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And I pulled into this little cove. Again, I'm 18, she's 13. And I said, listen, we're going to get married someday. We hadn't even dated. There was no dating. And I just declared, we're going to get married someday. It's going to be a few years. And
we're going to go through a lot. There'll be some ups and downs. I mean, he had this whole speech
Wow.
that he gave me. And I didn't jump out of the canoe, which I still think was pretty
that was pretty
strong
good.
Strong on my
I made
part.
sure we were a
That's a
long
good
way
sign.
from the house. But so that was very prophetic. But I will say, there have been ups and downs, before the marriage, after the marriage, because we got married 7 years after that. Yeah. And, but I'll say,
That's right,
I think
2025, yeah.
Yeah. So the ups and downs are certainly there,
Right.
but the faith, I think, was always there, and not that we always exercised it perfectly by any means, but she makes me better. Full stop. I mean, there's a million examples of that, and so just the challenge to live what you believe and to be bold to call you out when you're not doing it. She's really good at all those things. And so I again, that gets into the sappy bit, but I hate to even think where I would be, what life would be without her. So.
Well,
Yeah,
and Randy, I
absolutely.
think I hear there's two themes going on there. One is every guy marries up, right?
Yes.
and I continue to hear that, and I don't think we mean that jokingly. I think it's a serious thing that, we have the awesome women in our lives, and for some reason they saw mercy on us and was like, you need my help. But aside from that, also I see not always. There's always exceptions, but Randy, maybe you did. I'm making an assumption here. We didn't come from Christian backgrounds. We didn't grow up in the church. You
Right.
look at Julie's life. She has a strong faith background with her family, and so that certainly doesn't hurt any as far as how they can lift us up, right, Randy? As husbands because of their backgrounds and who they are.
Well, absolutely. And it's a thing, Julie's dad passed
almost
4 years ago, but they'd been married a long time.
60 years.
60. I mean, a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You compare that to my background. Mom was married 8 times before she passed. You knew her, Scott, way back then.
Yeah.
And very, very, very different backgrounds. And the neat thing, I think, in that, though, is, God uses all that, as Romans says. He uses it for his good, for those who are called. And so, her family background has had a big impact on my faith and my, our marriage.
Yeah.
But it goes the other way too, right? So I bring a unique perspective that she wouldn't have otherwise, growing up in that constant nuclear family, if you will. So it goes both ways, interestingly enough. None of our background is wasted, Scott. That's the beauty of God and how he works.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Her faith is what brought me back around, and that's another story. But just some pretty amazing things that she brought to our relationship when it came to God and that openness. And yeah,
I'm a
that
slow
journey.
learner because I didn't find the Lord until after Scott and I had been together for a while. So, I mean, if you watched our original, you
Yep.
kind of know a
Yeah.
little bit of that story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
So
think
go
when,
ahead, Julie.
just real quick, I mean, yes, watching my parents and their relationship wasn't perfect by any stretch, right? No marriage is, but just the tenacity and, like you said, that everyday perseverance and persistence in that marriage, that they weren't going to give up.
Mm-hmm.
And when we first started talking marriage and doing all that, one of the main things that we said was divorce is not an option for us. Like, we're never even going to use that word in a conversation because there's always a way. And so I think I said it jokingly one
Mm-hmm.
time early in our marriage, and he got angry. He's like, no, we are not.
Yeah.
That's not funny. You don't joke about that. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that being really the groundwork for our marriages, no matter what, we will find a way to work this out. So
Yeah.
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 It's after, his mom was divorced several times. Her mom was divorced several times. It's like, this stops here. We're done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. Excellent. So here's what we want to get to today. Randy and Julie, you guys are normal. Well, I think
thank
we
you.
disqualified that earlier, that maybe you're not so normal. But but going through a normal day of your life, and you're doing that every day, 7 days a week, 24/7. And we really want to tie that to something that's on your heart, and that persistence in those battles that you're up against. So what does that everyday walk with Christ look like? I mean, so you're sitting and having breakfast, you guys are working together now, but before, Randy, you were going to work, you guys were in China, Belgium, your 4 children. I mean, all kinds of stuff going on. What does that all look like when you center that back around to Christ?
go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think that word normal, I'll just preface the details by saying, I think that word normal means different things when you're a Christian and when you're not. And so we were just talking about that in our Wednesday prayer time on Facebook. Was that this week, last week, whenever? Is this idea of, we just look at some of the things God's called us to and the vision he's put in our minds over the last 3 years. And so much of that's coming to fruition in really big ways. And so half of me says, act surprised. The other half says, no, this is normal for a Christian. God gives you vision and you're faithful and he's faithful. And so don't be surprised. So, that's where that whole word normal. But I think for us, it's varied through the years. There were places in my career where the previous career where I was traveling, almost half the time. And it was hard travel to third world countries and developing countries, I guess we say now, coming home sick with dysentery and GR, whatever. And so, there was those periods of time. And then the last several years of my career, I almost never traveled and even worked from home quite a bit. So the details have always looked different. But I think the normal part of it is, morning quiet time of some kind or other. And it's separate. We don't do that together. One of us is slightly grumpy in the morning. And so that doesn't always work.
Truly.
I'm not a morning person. I own it. It is just not my time.
Yeah. But, and then the kids are off to the races and we'd be off to the races. I think we've done a really phenomenal job of being together as a family for dinner, almost all the time. And that just came naturally.
Yeah.
We were blessed with kids who weren't athletically gifted. So we've never had to live that life where you're traveling 7 days a week, with kids sports and doing all that stuff. So
maybe say it differently. They weren't interested in the athlete.
However you like, we consider it a blessing.
We were happy that they didn't want to travel so much.
But
yeah.
So
Yeah.
it on the whole, we've tried to keep things fairly normal.
Calm.
Calm is a much better word. Calm, routine. I'm a huge fan of routine, frankly.
As are our daughters and our sons as well. And so that thread that you're talking about, that kind of runs through I call it the red thread that runs through our whole life, has always been our faith. And so no matter whether we lived in Belgium, China, here, walking through the adoptions was hard. And so through all of that, that thread that runs through all of it, and it might get messy at times, and it might look like it's all knotted up at times in our story, has always been Jesus. And so the fact that we always go back to him, no matter what, we might go back bruised and bloodied and
yelling and screaming
and saying, why have you done this to us, Jesus? But we always go back. And I think that's what has kept us, above the waves. And so, and that's key. I mean, that's the only thing that has kept us above the waves, is always going back to that.
And I think the other thing I would say to that is we've, which is weird in particular for me to say as a planner and whatever, is we gave up years ago. Gave up's the wrong word. We abandoned the approach of pros, cons lists, that kind of a thing. And it's been like, where's God leading? And let's go do that. And frequently he leads a few months ahead, right? And you don't know what's coming years ahead, and it's scary, but my gosh, we've had some amazing adventures because of that. The moves overseas and some of those things. It's just like, why are you doing that? Well, I don't know. God said, go do that, and we'll sort it out when we get there. And why are you doing that? I don't know. Are you sure you want to adopt that kid? No, I'm not sure at all, but God said, go do it. So we're going to do it. And, so it's not, don't get me wrong. We're not like twinkle toes around and ignoring reality, but, for all those big decisions, it's like we trust God, trust what his word says, and let the details fall where they may. And there's been pain in that, but on the whole, my gosh, what a life. We're so blessed. Yeah. It's off the charts. Yeah.
Well, and I think what he said, we trust what the word says. And so we've mentioned a couple times the adoptions. Our second adoption in particular, we weren't real sure that it was what we wanted, but we knew by praying and studying the word and really being in that it's what God wanted. And so we went ahead and we did it. And it was a rough 7 years after we brought that boy home because of attachment disorders and just
all kinds of issues there.
He was an older child that we brought into our home. And so it caused a lot of trauma, not only to him who came from trauma, but also to our children who were having to live through him healing from his trauma. So, but through it all, we trusted and that was truly what God had told us to do. And I think we had friends that are like, what are you doing? Sever this, give him back, do whatever you need to do. They're like, do whatever you need to do to get that kid out of your house. And I'm like, why would I do that? Why would I do that? God told me to do this. And if I turn my back on this child, I'm turning my back on God. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to do that. And one of the things at the very beginning, when everything just kind of blew up in that, Randy very wisely said, the enemy could very easily use this to destroy our marriage and to destroy our family. Mm-hmm. We are not going to allow him to do that. We're going to lean into each other, but more importantly, we're going to lean into God. And I'm going to start crying. And through that time, our marriage just exploded, and it was strengthened.
In a good way.
In a very good way, yeah. And it was strengthened. And but again, it goes back to that little red thread that runs through our lives of Jesus. And if we didn't have that, it would have destroyed our lives. It would have destroyed our other children. So I just, that's always what I come back to.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear you answering or saying yes. It's always God's next yes. And you said many yeses, it sounds like, and just being obedient in that. I mean, it's beautiful how despite, that you could see that and that you push through it. I mean, I can't even imagine. I can just like barely, in what you said, what it would be like to bring a child in and then to see your children suffer, through that process and that you did, because I feel like nowadays people find everything there's an easy out, just get rid of them, or just divorce, the grass is greener on the other side, but that's not the case. And if we were to push through things, if we were to push through the difficult stuff instead of giving up, we would be so much more enriched by it, I think. And I see that in your guys' story, and what little I know of it, I see that in you guys.
Yeah, years ago, I did a talk called One Next Step. And it was really, as I was looking back over our lives and over our journey and everything, I realized that God never called me to the whole story. He called me to just take my one next step, and that he would lead me from there. And so that has really been my motto, is like, okay, God, I don't know the whole story, but I'm willing to take that one next step that you've called me to. So, and that's easy to do, right? Taking that one next step is easy to do. So, and then he'll open your eyes and take, okay, now this is the next step that you need to take. So that's kind of been the way I look at it.
Yeah, back to the climbing metaphor. If you're climbing, a mountain or some cliff face or something, rarely can you see the whole path up. Wow. But you can see what's the next move, what's maybe the next two moves. And so as you make those moves, all of a sudden things come into focus, and places to place your hands and your feet come into focus that you could have never seen lower down. Yeah. And so the temptation when you're a new climber is you get there and you freeze because you can't see the whole path. And so you learn, you're a lot stronger than you think you are. And if you push your muscles, they'll do a whole lot more than you think they'll do. And then as you move up the wall, all of a sudden things come into focus that weren't there before. And so it's just that constant, I'm going to do this segment. Now I'm going to do that segment. Now I'm going to do that. And then, next thing you know, you're standing on the top, looking at the sun over the, so yeah.
Wow. So there's so many directions I want to take off on what you shared, because it's so rich. There's so many things we can take away from this. So I want to come back to, first of all, just a simple yes or no. So you guys have been up against some battles.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what I heard you say through all that you shared, and that Carmen so beautifully summarized, is that your persistence in your routine has brought you back to what has gotten you through those times.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Very much so.
So
it hasn't always been pretty. Like don't.
No, but that's
there have been days that we could have gotten on this video and not been smiling and had bad things to say about God and the world and everything else. But it's separating out that what you feel versus what at times is what gets you through it.
Okay, so let's bring this home then. So let's say there's somebody watching this right now, and they're thinking, gosh, I'm up against some battles right now. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to make it. I can't see beyond the wall.
Yeah.
What in the world am I supposed to do right now?
I just was writing about this, and it was interesting because I've battled my fear, right? I've shared a little bit about that with the rock climbing. And so as I've been learning to rock climb, and you're trying for that next hold, right? You're trying to reach that next hold, and you're pushing and pushing. Randy and our other climbing partner, they'll always say, don't reach for the hold, aim past that hold, and then you'll get it. Aim past it. And so when, and it never, I was like, oh, okay, I'll aim past. And then the other day I was thinking about it, and I'm like, that's how we need to live our lives, is when we come up against those obstacles, against those struggles, against those fears, instead of trying to work our way around it, instead of trying to figure out a way to get out of it, instead of, just basically running away from it, aim past it and try to think about, okay, if I walk through this fear or this struggle and I go through that, what's going to be on the other side of that? What am I going to aim past this struggle and to get to on the other side? What does God have for me? And kind of think future forward a little bit, still being in that struggle and still having to go through the hard stuff, which isn't fun, but also having that future forward outlook of, but what's God got for me on the other side of this when I aim past it, right? And get excited about that.
Wow.
And,
that's good. That's my wife.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say there, Scott, is and this comes from years of being in R&D. If you asked me back then, hey, what are you going to be doing 6 months from now? I never knew, because what I was going to be doing 6 months from then depended a lot on the results of the experiments that were being run then. Okay. And so I think in those struggles, again, it come back to, you don't have to know the whole path. It's kind of, think about if you're in a maze and you're trying to run a maze, you have no idea what's around the third corner, but focus on what, like she said, the next step. Mm-hmm. If you can just take the next step without letting the whole journey paralyze you, then when you do that one, it's something new is going to open up that you don't see now. But if you don't take the next step, you're never going to see it. And so I think for people who are struggling, that's the key. How are you going to get all the way through it? I don't know. Right. But what needs to happen tomorrow, and do that. And then tomorrow, what needs to happen the day after that, do that. And then some period of time, it sounds really simplistic, but some period of time later, you're going to look back on that and go, I would have never, ever been able to predict that was the path through this struggle. But until you're walking the path, you can't figure it out.
That's good.
And so I think we get overwhelmed by the size of the goal, but if you can stay focused on the next couple of tasks, as I always tell the kids, they'll come, especially my oldest son, worrying about whatever for the future. I always tell them, look, you're worried about question 89 and you haven't answered question 2 yet. So let's answer question 2, and then we'll do question 3. And by the time we get to question 89, we're going to know what the answer is.
Or we may not even have to get to question 89 because it might be answered before then. So, but yeah, we always say that hindsight, right? Hindsight is 20/20. When you look behind you, you see everything and you can really see what happened and see it well. But and that's what, when we think about our second adoption, as we've mentioned, it was hard in those 7 years, but we continued. We continued loving this kid that was extremely unlovable at times. We called him our prickly porcupine because you'd try to hug him and he'd push you away. And
I think we called him worse than that a couple of times.
So, but now when we look back on those struggles, we see why. I do anyway. I can see why he's now on fire for Christ, right? Wow. He is a leader in his youth group. He's sharing the Bible verses and all this stuff on social media, and that's his goal. And he's working with organizations for mental health in youth. And so
he's a neat kid.
He's a really neat kid, right? Wow. But we had to walk through it, man. Yeah. And we did not see that. We didn't see this coming, right? We actually saw jail coming a few times for his future. And so you just have to trust that God's plan is multiple times better than what our plan could ever be for our lives and for the lives of our children.
So many examples of battles that you two were up against. and you were persistent, not just persistent, like I'm going to do this, but you were persistent with the character and word and love of God that saw you through that to produce amazing results. Look at the two of you now and hear you share your stories. God's word is life-changing.
Oh, yeah.
It has
Absolutely.
an impact. So we have just a minute or two left here. Carmen, is there anything that's coming to mind for you or that you wanted to follow up with Randy and Julie on?
I see just different parallels in everything you're saying. I love your correlation and something, where we put ourselves out of our comfort zone, because that makes us, because we don't do it so often here in America. It forces us to trust God.
Right.
If we put ourselves in situations, because we can become really comfortable. And when we're comfortable, we're not, growth is in the struggle. So you guys are awesome. I don't even know how to say it. I want to meet you, and I seriously do want to go rock climbing with you. And Scott is terrified of heights, but I would love for us to do that together.
Yeah, it'd be fun.
So
Absolutely.
we may not ever be able to connect with you again because I think we're out of time, and I don't know that we're ever going to be able to go rock climbing. It just doesn't seem like we're going to have time for that.
God, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. Trust me. Trust me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you know what? I have to share this because I think it relates to what you're talking about in 2 Corinthians 4:18. I have it here. It says, while we look not at the things which are seen, but at the things which are not seen. For the things which are seen are temporal, but the things which are not seen are eternal. And I think of, what we can't see sometimes, again, to some of your parallels, there's the next step. I can see that. I can grasp that. And I'll even go beyond that a little bit. And that way I'll get there. But we don't see the end in mind, but we trust that God has that end in mind for us if we just take that next step with him. So that verse came to mind for me. So the challenge that I want to leave with people today is surround yourself with the Word of God. Surround yourself with Christ in that everyday walking around kind of life. And I really believe that everybody that's listening right now, if I could just say this to you, that what you just saw with Randy and Julie is they're walking around everyday kind of life, and how they bring Jesus Christ into that to be able to have the impact that they're having and make a difference in their life that we don't call normal anymore, right?
Right.
So what I want to tell everybody is that take a look at your everyday life and realize that Jesus is right there and he wants to be a part of that. Just like what we saw with Randy and Julie. It's real life that we're in, and just take that next step with him and he'll see you through that to the end. So
Amen.
Until next time, keep faithful and look at that everyday walking around relationship with Christ, because he'll see you through it. Thanks, and have a great day, everybody. Thanks, Randy and Julie, for being with us.
Yeah,
Thanks for
Scott
having
Carmen.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us this week on Your Everyday Life podcast. We pray that you were encouraged. Make sure to visit our website at youreverydaylife.org, where you can subscribe and receive weekly devotional blogs from Scott. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Your Everyday Life. Be sure to give us a comment on how words of encouragement has inspired you, and pass the word on to a friend who you know needs encouragement. Be sure to tune in again next week when once again we will look at everyday life topics and apply words of encouragement. Until then, stay encouraged by what you heard today, and may you be greatly blessed.